prestigious Distinguished Alumnus Award in the Diamond Jubilee year of the Institute. He has also been conferred with honorary membership of Indian Institute of Metals. Next in the sequence is Dr. Subrata Rakshit. Dr. Subrata Rakshit. Yeah. Dr. Subrata Rakshit was already there in session 1, so he needs no introduction, but in brief, I will mention here Dr. Subrata Rakshit. He is the Director, Center for Artificial Intelligence and Robotics. Prior to this, he was the State Director, Technology Care. Dr. Subrata Rakshit did his B.Tech from IIT Bombay in Engineering Physics and completed his MS in Electrical Engineering and PhD in Image Processing from Caltech, USA, and a short postdoctoral fellowship at Washington University. He joined CARE DRDO way back in December 1994, where he has worked till date. At CARE DRDO, Dr. Rakshit has worked on image processing, computer vision, neural networks, and cyber security. He has published a number of papers in peer-reviewed journals, international and national conferences. He has received DRDO award for his work on neural network-based image matching and for image and video processing for net-centric systems. He has contributed to the Raksha Mantri's Artificial Intelligence Task Force report and has interacted with various MOD organizations regarding adoption of AI technologies in indigenous defense systems. Now I will be inviting Commodore Rajesh Sharma, retired. He is the Vice President of Head Value Systems, Defense R&D, Bharat Forge Limited. May I request you, sir, come on the dais. Commodore Rajesh Sharma, retired, is the Vice President, Head Value Systems, Defense R&D, Bharat Forge Limited, and has been with Bharat Forge since last 8 years. He is a part of the top leadership of Bharat Forge Limited and has played pivotal role in formulation and implementation of different strategic plans. He has been instrumental in providing technology leadership to guide and mentor teams to achieve operational excellence at Bharat Forge Limited. He is a technology certificate with M.Tech in Communications from IIT Delhi and MSc in Defense Studies. Commodore Rajesh Sharma was an important part of R&D organization of Indian Navy, Weapons Electronic System Engineering establishment for 12 years and possesses 3 decades of rich and diverse experience in the Navy in various middle and senior management levels. Now I will be inviting Mr. Surit Hajra. He is a country head defense Honeywell India. So please come on the dais. Mr. Surit Hajra has over 20 years experience in aerospace across product engineering, strategy, account management and sales. His current responsibility includes driving growth for Honeywell defense and space business, partnering to develop greater Make in India capability. He is a partner with in-country Honeywell Institute to drive custom offering regional solutions. He is a Bachelor in Electrical Engineering and MBA from the Indian School of Business. Now I will be inviting Ms. Vrinda Kapoor. Yeah, she is please come on the right. She is a lead technology entrepreneur with a focus on lab market innovation. She is the recipient of numerous national and international awards in recognition of her work. She is the co-founder of Third iTech, a company focused on building CMOS, image sensors, and AI-enabled tools to revolutionize data science. In 2020, she was selected to present her work with the Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi at Defense Expo in 2019. Ms. Vrinda Kapoor was awarded the Army Design Hero Award of Excellence by the Chief of Army Staff for her contribution to enhance the operational capabilities of the Indian Army. Last in the sequence is Mr. Rangan Iyengar. May I request you to please come on the line. He is the founder and MD of Complex Semantics, one of the leading companies working on AI in defense, focusing on ISR since 2015. His organization was completely selected by PS's office to deliver a solution of strategic importance to the forces. Mr. Anup holds 7 patents at USPTO and 9 pending at India PTO. Prior to conflict, he used to be an analog signal processing staff engineer at Broadcom, working on chip design. He is an alumni of West Plant and Army Engineering called Army College of Engineering. And now I will be inviting Sri Anurag Bajpayee sir. Yeah, he is already there. So he needs no introduction. So I will hand over the session to him for moderating the session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sanjay Manshi.
इसको तुम अपलोड करते हो तुम YouTube पे
Very good afternoon to all of you. I hope now this is the last session and you all must be tired. So we will be making this session brief but very interesting. We have with us industry champions being led by Mr. J.D. Patil, who does not need any introduction. He has headed L&T. We have startup champions, starting from the extreme right. If we see Ms. Vrunda Kapoor, she is one of the leading champions, startup champions in AI sector, and followed by others who are in the panel. We have outstanding scientists with us from DRDO, who needs no introduction because he has already spoken in the first session. So I would welcome all the panelists in this session. Since morning, from first session, we have heard step services, we have heard scientists, we have heard some startups in the second session, whatever the opportunities which are available for the students. Few questions have also been taken. Now we have everything on the plate, but nothing can be completed without the industry participation. Though there are some DPSUs, that defense public sector undertakings, who are working in this field, but unless the private industry or the startups come in this space, there will be a gap in this. And that is why all the industry champions are here. I don't need to go into the details of AI because everybody understands here what is AI and what is its significance. But what we have seen so far, there are many products in the civilian side. In military side, there are few products, but if we see today's event, it was one of the biggest events when 75 products have been launched at a single time. Still we see that there is a lot of scope in the military space where our industry, startups or MSMEs can work a lot. Seeing the present global scenario and in view of the future warfare, I am sure that AI plays a significant role on national defense. There are few low-hanging tools for the industry that may include logistics, supply chain management, cyber security, which may strengthen the foundation of engagement with the military, Indian military. There may be some high-end technologies like ISR, which was spoken in the first session by the services, that is intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, weapon systems, which may involve high-end technologies. The issue which I have perceived being in Ministry of Defense between the industry and the services, that is the sharing of data. We know that our forces are custodian of data, used data, and there is a apprehension which we have seen in the previous session, that apprehension regarding the secrecy of the data or confidentiality of the data. But our industry is here today. They are here to speak about how they have perfected their system, perfected their mechanism, so that it can be made secure. There is also a a step which needs to be taken on the services side, that they are supposed to develop a mechanism and maintain a balance, that what can be developed in-house and what can be given outside their domain or their R&D organization. I'll leave this here. First, I would request our champion, Mr. J.D. Patil, LNT, who is from Nagpur and Tudo, to say something on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Anurag. I see very clearly AI today in defense is virtually, a quote just comes to my mind. It's like Intel Inside. Today I don't see any major weapon system or a platform we can think of without any AI inside. Why I say this is all of us in industry who began doing the design and development, we truly start seeing how do you make your systems far different, far better, and towards that, the AI becomes extremely useful. The very rudimentary aspect of this started coming into our systems, let's say about 3 decades back, in the form of byte. A system which essentially does a self-diagnosis to be able to say what could be wrong and actually give a clue to the operator as to what needs to be corrected. And that's, I would say, is the earliest at the beginning of how good a byte you can put into a system of your own. And from there on, purely speaking on the military, and just with a small example, if you have an artillery system, you know that you do an artillery fire. Artillery is not an intelligent weapon, and when it's not an intelligent weapon, where you fire from and the kind of platform you are firing from actually would affect the accuracy of the endpoint. Now, as soon as you fire the first shot, there's still a warming up which is still happening on the barrel and a variety of systems associated. And whatever you would get on the first of the shot would never be so very accurate. It may be reasonable, but not an accurate one. Also, what happens in case of any of these shots is there's a good amount of shake that the overall system goes through, including the entire platform undergoing a shake and needs to stabilize before you fire. But today's war, you don't have time for all this. Now, if you don't have time for this, you need to be actually measuring very precisely at any given instance what a precise position of the platform is and incorporate it into your fire control. Also incorporate the precise muzzle velocity of each and every shot and start improving, and all this is happening without human intelligence. Now, when you do that, you start seeing that your third or fourth shot starts becoming extremely accurate. And that's essentially where, welcome to the world of, call it, very serious level of automation, but a lot is without any human intervention. Not everything is programmed. And that's essentially where AI starts coming in. In industry today, when we start talking of AI in defense, we start talking of varieties of platforms. And a very simple example would be when you build a major platform, there are thousands and thousands of sensors within, and you need to be able to take a call of what can fail when, and you start monitoring. And that monitoring by itself, through analysis, can tell you what is likely to be happening and take that action so that you're not caught with a surprise that the equipment was not good enough. Simple thing we do in military is about intruder. When an intruder is there, to be able to decide whether it's a human, whether it's an animal, because a human being is capable of walking on 4 legs, 2 hands and 2 legs, and to be able to precisely say that it's not an animal and it's something else, obviously the only thing you don't do is you don't auto shoot, and the auto shoot being kept out, obviously to say to the operator who is monitoring that this is precisely a kind of time you need your attention, and that attention is precisely what today AI systems can do. I can talk of dozens and dozens of examples because as Rasan Kubro, a very simple thing. We keep dealing with thousands of large EPC contracts being a very large organization. When contract to contract the clause changes, then AI actually tells you what you need to be wary in terms of risk. I'm talking of completely different domain, but that's essentially where you start learning before the contract begins, right at an RFP stage, that do you need to be wary of certain specific clauses, and that's something which happens. Industry 4.0 we know, and of course Industry 4.0 also means in process, while the equipment or let's say a subsystem or a component is being manufactured, you want to know whether it's going to be good, it's going to be distocking, it's going to be out of tolerance, and you better know it before, otherwise you don't even reject it. Now that's a domain which we see an enormous amount of use, and it as much applies to the military domain as it applies to any other manufacturing. We have seen that having made literally 30 cities in this country, which have been completely smart, we know that there is an enormous amount of issues. I heard a lot of questions to the previous session about privacy, but the fact is, cities, if they have to run well, there needs to be a monitoring. And you are monitoring millions and millions of people, including face recognition, to every aspect of that person. And from there, I can tell you a simple application of it in terms of just an organizational operation. Can you automate their salaries? If a man has just walked into the gate and come to the office, you can actually note his presence and his salary automatically gets processed. And these are something which is happening. At L&T today, we actually do something which is very unusual. Every organization talks of human count. We say no, human count is not good enough. Along with human count, we must count our bots. If we count our bots, that's essentially where you gain a very different level of capability, because that's a bot which essentially doesn't ask anything. It keeps performing, it keeps working, and it keeps giving an alert just in case something is going wrong. The COVID, we're still passing through the trailing phase of COVID. I can tell you there are hundreds and hundreds of applications for COVID. If two people are seated next to each other and just walking, you can actually tell a person, you're too close to the other person. And this is happening in real time. You're able to tell that the person next is running a high fever. And all this is with AI. You fly a drone and keep telling people with a speaker on the drone that what is happening right now is not right. There's too much of concentration of people, there's too much of concentration of, let's say, people with a body temperature which is beyond limits, or people who are coughing or any of those kind of things. Now, these are all cues one can take out of what the person is performing through video analytics and through an AI engine, which essentially is going to be able to tell precisely what is to be done. Simplest form in operation on supply chain of major military program that we've been running, we find that automating your inventory, supply chain, becomes an amazing application. The moment your supplies are below next 2 days of production, automatically an order gets placed and an urgency level is raised, and that's all on auto. I mean, it's all AI. So today when we start talking about applying AI to the industry specific to defense or associated functions, it's truly happening right across domains. As I said, it's varieties of autonomous kind of applications. As an organization today, we actually have a warship which can be converted into an autonomous warship. We have underwater vessels which are autonomous, and we talked about it about 3 decades back in terms of a completely autonomous vehicle. Just senses Google coordinates through GPS, you know what exactly it is supposed to do, and all they exist today. Unmanned systems have always been known, but unmanned with an AI gives a very, very special ability, because we believe that the future of war, when we are talking, is going to be far standoff distances, far more automated, and there's very little somebody can do in the form of a human intervention. What stage we actually draw an attention of a soldier or a commander or at what stage it will do, let's say, engaging on its own is a matter which obviously is for the military leadership to truly decide, because depends on what terrain, what place, what kind of a background with which you are doing, which will make all the difference. And then go on and on. I have about 1.5 pages of simple, just 1 point written on that, but maybe more during the period. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patil. You have raised certain points how the military can have trust on the industry, and the way you have shown, and it is for our services to look at it, that how they can engage with the industry. There are steps which have been taken by the services, and I think more steps needs to be taken. Now I would request Ms. Vrinda Kapoor, who is the youngest champion startup, to share her views on the industry perspective, how to get engaged with the Indian military.
Thank you so much, sir, and thank you for having me here today. To bring it back to one of the issues that sir was talking about, and that got raised in the previous panel as well, is that when it comes to the military providing or interacting with data, providing data to both the private sector as well as academia, we really face a conundrum. It's not just the data that's sensitive, it's also the context in which applications have to be built or platforms have to be utilized that is sensitive. So the question is it just the data, or is it the entire continuum, the entire concept of operations that needs to be held in a lot of regard and needs to be handled in a sensitive way for this to exist? And so this, I think, comes back to a policy imperative that we really need to think about, because this is only going to increase. This is the beginning of a journey where there needs to be a digital continuum between the academia, the R&D institutions like DRDO, the military itself, which includes operational data, startups and large companies. And we need to figure out a way to have that continuum of sharing of information across these lines. That's where we're going to emerge with a solution where in the end, everybody is able to contribute a piece of their input to finally serve the warfighter in an operational environment. There are going to be various degrees of how this data needs to be shared, various degrees of sensitivity, various degrees of integration of that information with the product that the warfighter uses. But do we need it? Absolutely. So one way of thinking about it is that data gets shared off premises into locations where there is control. The other way of doing it is to allow private sector individuals or R&D individuals to come into operation centers or areas where data is held and study it, and analyze it, create concepts out of it before it can be shared more widely in the industry. So those are two things that we need to think about. The second, and I believe so, this is a fundamental problem that we are going to see as we take up AI solutions in the Indian context, is creating interoperability of data. We have data coming in from various different platforms that are designed to never talk to each other. And ultimately, for us to enable AI, we need to think about how this data can be allowed to talk to each other. So we have Russian platforms, we have platforms that have been developed by DRDO, we have platforms that have been developed by Indian industry, coming from Indian startups, and then of course we have NATO systems. For AI, let's look at, for example, an air command and control center. For that to effectively work in any one theater, all of those different sensors need to have a platform where they interact with each other. Now that's something that nobody is going to build and give up. It kind of defeats their business case, but it's also something that's critical for us as we choose to use AI. So that's really another place where Indian industry really needs to play a major part and innovate. And the third thing, and I think because AI is so, as Mr. Patil pointed out, there are so many applications of AI that can come up across the defense ecosystem. Everywhere, from the sensing part, like remote sensing, as Mr. Bhaskar was talking about, all the way up into command and control applications, where Dr. Rakshit was talking about in the morning. We need AI across this entire continuum. We need to actually segregate and divide and conquer. large industries can take up a lot of what has already been built, what has been developed in the last decade and implement them. Whereas small industries and startups can work along with DRDO in the more cutting edge of AI, along with the entire academic potential that we have in the country, to start thinking about what could be required in the next generation. So those are the areas that I think that, we need to think about policy imperatives, and also one thing that we miss out continuously is that continuum. How do the armed forces interact with each of the entities in this continuum and deliver a final solution that our warfighters can actually use? Thank you.
Thank you, Vrinda. You have raised a very important point, that is how all can contribute to a same goal. That is very important for all of us, because we all are working in AI, but at some point of time we become, in our individual domain, then we work. You have also raised the point of how to mention about the sensitivity of the context, sensitivity of data, degree of its sensitivity, and then policy. Certainly, that is very much essential. And today's session will lead to some policy formulation. And I think all the suggestions which are being given, which have been given in all the 3 sessions, that will become a part of the policy. Thank you, Linda. Next, I would like to request Commodore Ajay Sharma from Bharat Forge.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I am the only one in the panel who is ex-defense and also now 27 years in defense and thereafter 8 years in private corporate. So I would like to give both sides perspective and let's see where it takes us. Now, first of all, in the morning, Honorable Lakshamanji also said, and many panels thereafter, that what has changed. Why the warfare thinking in the defense has to be a modern warfare. Earlier also systems were there were fixed systems, but what has changed is earlier systems used to behave the way they were coded for. But now, with AI coming in, these systems can become intelligent and can take their own decisions. So that is the whole plan which is changing and it needs a total rethinking. Earlier systems, what were built upon, were basically thinking some limited targets, drone targets. Now we are talking about swarms of UAVs. And suddenly, and they are also intelligent enough, they can change their behavior depending on how the counter things are happening. So what is to be done on that? Now, why this is being given that much importance? Because 20 countries are following a national strategies on AI. It is also called as the 4th Industrial Revolution, because all of us are trying to understand that this AI in the defense, like I said earlier also systems were there, but there was always a man in loop. The way AI is going to evolve tomorrow and will have the capability, a man can be taken out of the loop and systems can take their own decisions and can take on themselves. Like I gave you an example of swans. Now, if swans start controlling themselves and you just give them the target and they find and you create some safety features in them, if you want to keep a man in loop, but the intelligence will build up that much that even that safety factors which a person has created in those UAVs or in the swans, they can overlook and they can overpass. So this is where the things are going on. This is why it is being discussed upon that warfare philosophy and everything is going to change as we move forward. One thing also, now this AI is not a new concept. What we know of is almost 2-3 decades, minimum 30 years old concept. But why we are talking now and suddenly it has caught the attendance of everybody? Because it is not only AI along with robotics and also the ICs, chips have become so cheap and more in a very small size. Now the concepts are going on that I can have a contact lens whereby just blinking I can have the whole data available with me. Now you imagine the war scenario, then from the top echelon to the soldier level, if everybody is well connected, and I have the information, where is my soldier, where is my own decision making, and it takes a total different concept now. And information sharing, all that information processing, it is not possible, was not possible earlier, but now with the AI, it is possible to handle such large amount of data. It was not that earlier exercises not being undertaken, both from Army, Navy and Air Force side, but the data collected was on a singular basis, and it was that by the time you could build up intelligence out of that data, the situation would have already changed the way morning Chief of Army staff. But now with the AI, you can process it much faster, decisions can be eminent and can be given there. That's what is bringing us on here, that why we have to take it that seriously. Also, I think we should not link up AI only in defense. AI has to be seen with the civil applications. Now, I'll tell you now, like I gave you an example, that technology is moving towards that side. In a contact lens, I can have, now what is the next to the internet? Next to the internet is the brain waves, like somebody spoke in the morning. It means by my thinking, I can find out what is going to happen, and I can talk even if I'm not able to talk, and that information flows in a very collated manner and a network manner. Now, how does it help such? Even in the civil parlance, suppose, like what Mr. Patil gave an example, purchase orders and those type of things will happen. Now, suppose somebody gives me a quote, and I don't know, has he given me half quote, low quote, or, was it genuine? But by click of that information available with me, I can find out what the rates are there all over. And that's how it strengthens the case, both in the civil application, also in the military application for our procurement, for our surveillance. Also, we are talking about robo soldiers now, robotic soldiers. Imagine, like whatever has been a limitation of a person in the war scenario, if it goes out with a robo, there, it demands a change in the warfare, what we are going to look into. How he is going to control, till what level we are going to control them, how suppose it comes to a stage when they are taking charge, it is also thought about by the experts. At that time, person, man and human being have to do hand in glove with them. If they exceed our intelligence, which they have already exceeded on that side. Now, I'll just talk about industry point of view. I have certain statistics. In India, before coming here, there were about 20,000 plus startups already available in India on AI. Now, how does it make us different? Some of the students ask the questions, what is my job? Am I getting more job or not? These type of things. AI is the actual thing, the way things are going on. Now, why so? Because in each, like what Mr. Patil said, all defense systems are going to have a flavor of AI because it improves the efficacy, operational efficacies of those systems. Like even in our company, we started, with unmanned ground vehicles, autonomous vehicles. We are working on lots of autonomous underwater systems. We are also working on object detection and tracking. So what we realized that if we made one remote control weapon system. First, we did tracking using conventional coding, and there, if a remote control weapon system is tracking a UAV or a person, that person goes behind the target. Using the conventional coding, we realized that we used to miss that target. Whereas with the AI, that intelligence, historical data is already built in, it improves and we were able to track even if the target goes behind. So those type of things are, value addition which is going to happen on AI. But how we utilize it in the subsequent things, that we have to take on. So one question from the industry side which I would like to raise, and there was a question asked on, like we are aware, AI systems, models, they train on the data what is being provided. Instead of commercial, on the defense side, sharing of that data is very important. Because we also have to understand, on any AI system, if you train it with the wrong data, it can be detrimental also, and it will not yield the results what are desirable. So sharing, we need to find out a mechanism. Like I tell you, we are working with on certain language translation systems, where again requirement of field data is very important. I'm saying our Army and Navy, they were very helpful in sharing that data, but maybe as a system, not as a case-to-case basis. We must find out a mechanism where this sharing of data and where also, Indian companies only, maybe a mechanism can be found out, because if you don't share the data, the system will not evolve based on that. That's what is my first comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commodore Rajesh Sharma. You have raised points related to faster decision making and also regarding the dual products which relate to dual users. Now may I request Mr. Sumit Hazra from Honeywell India to share his thoughts on this.
After I heard Mr. Patil and Commodore speak, Dr. Rakshit has even started. I'm kind of reminded of an old Greek comment says it's good to be silly at the right moment. They have covered most of the salient points, but I still kind of try to see if there's something we can bring up. See, all through morning we have had different panels trying to chalk out the role of AI in defense and some civil applications have come. And I think from the faculty member from IIT Delhi said it right. It's a tool and it's not an end in itself. Somewhere it's in between, somewhere like the application layer of that whole networking thing. So you start off with the hardware, as Commodore mentioned, it's typically a control system. Any military hardware at a very broad chain tooling level can be called a damper level called a control system. You move on to that, from that to sensors. From sensors we are going to data management, and from there algorithms, intelligence. Nowadays, certain, for example, at Honeywell we have used quantum computing. We have built a quantum computer. We have used quantum computing to enhance the intelligence, or rather the computation from that intelligence. And then you essentially move from asset AI to enterprise AI, because for the military, eventually, the whole enterprise AI is relevant. Typically, just tracking one unit, one drone, one tank, one artillery gun is not a concept. But I think as data is important, I think it can be definitely worked out. And I speak from a foreign OEM, so I am more sensitive to the sharing part of the data that Commodore mentioned or Mr. Patil also mentioned. And I think AI is one of the safest partnering tools with Indian entities, Indian companies, Indian startups, Indian academia, and they then, in turn talk to the military end user. In today's world, there are enough levels of abstraction that have been created or that can be created. And one of the safest, I say, is because it does not create, and this is a sensitive topic, it does not create workforce utilization commission. If I want to make an engine, and if I want to share the making of an engine with an entity, his workforce is engaged in making, let's say, 50% of the engine. The workforce makes castings, makes turbines, all of that. If I just want to sell an engine, that workforce typically doesn't do anything from a military perspective. In AI, cyber, or even quantum applications, I think the skill of the likes of, we saw the presentation from Hard Electronics and the like. I think the likes of DPSUs have a very clear-cut role where other OEMs who have had these kind of experiences dovetail. For example, we are a company which does both defense as well as we do non-connected industrial applications. We have gas metering, smart gas metering and smart metering systems in almost all the top oil refineries, starting from Aramco, Reliance, and all of that. Can that not be extended to the EDs? Can it not be extended to the BRD? Can it not be extended to the whole network of BRDs? As Mr. Patil mentioned about supply chain management, can that BRD, ED stock not be connected with flight hours of the fleet? It can. It needs some work. We haven't arrived yet, but therein lies the scope of partnership I think the confidentiality element of data is understood across all industries for various reasons. Aadhaar data is confidential for certain reasons, your bank passwords are confidential for certain reasons, military data is also confidential for its own reasons. So I think there are protocols or there are policies, there are enough amount of deterrent policies that are in there which can take care of that. What I think is the missing element in the whole discussion is, I think both the end user, the Indian partner, and the foreign entity, foreign OEM, etc., whoever has the skills, they have to sit on the same table and define the requirement and the solution of it. Again, not just on the asset part, but more on the enterprise part, because eventually that whole broad topic called network-centric warfare is nothing but enterprise management of how you are fighting the enemy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumit. Very valid point that we need to move from asset AI to enterprise AI. It is well mentioned in your brief, what you have indicated, what you have just mentioned right now. Now, last in the industry, I would request Mr. Anurup Iyengar from Cognate.
So I think the last speaker's job is always the most difficult one. I'll try to be pointed, and sir, with your permission, I'll also probably, be a little prescriptive, speaking out of some experience. So there are some notes that I made as my, fellow panelists were making comments, and we executed a very interesting project, for a tri-services command and the ADB, the translation device which relies on field data. And we kind of lived through this. It's been a lived experience over the last 5 years because getting the data out is such a huge problem, and the data of course doesn't come to the organization. It is given in some secure location. And the biggest challenge is this: because it is so highly secure from a very physical perspective, the velocity of execution makes a big hit. So what could have been done in probably say 18 months becomes a 36-month project. And what it does is it kind of balloons the cost. Many times, it kind of derails some of your plans that you have. Because on the ground, when you're trying to interface with the Fauji's, the challenge that is there, it's very different when you're talking to officers. So having lived through this experience through 2016 and 2018, we had actually presented and shared, a suggestion to the then RM, which is a concept of a public-private data lake. So that's why, and my suggestions and comments would be to both MOD officials here and the serving officers. So is there only legal ways to protect data? I would say the answer is no. There are sufficient technological things that have happened in the last 3 or 4 years. One such paradigm is what is referred to as confidential computing. People are speaking about privacy and those kind of concerns, but signing NDAs and signing legal documents is important, but I don't believe it's not good enough. Some of you may know this. There's a very nice service launched by AWS. You can go look it up. My memory fails me. You can just say AWS in privacy preserving compute. So you have a mechanism where they create 2 clusters. You see, when an entity shares data, the model that gets created also is very important for the entity which is creating the model. What about the sanctity and security of the model? Because that is the bread and butter of that entity. Now, how do you kind of create a mechanism where both exchange of model and exchange of data can happen in a very secure way? So AWS has a service. Good news is there is a Desi company based in Bangalore called, it's a dear friend, so I'm not marketing for it, but yes, he's done some good work. Leader.io, check them out. So they do essentially privacy preserving AI. My take is this: having seen some of these problems, I would say that going the federated learning route is probably the way to go about doing things. Federation has been in the works for the last 3 or 4 years. We have experimented with it with some of our work. I can't claim that we have got it right. For example, one of our translator devices, it's only a box which goes to the border, but then there is a 3-layer system where the data is collected and it comes back to the central location for training. So, sir, my recommendations or my asks of MOD and the serving officers, if you can probably look at confidential computing and federation. This is probably one way of looking at solving how do you give out data to third parties without having to be worried about anonymization or de-identification, because execution and timeliness and not having cost overruns are also very important. End of the day, as industry, we want working products, we want revenues, and if delays happen, they take a big hit. Also, from a very secondary perspective, once data comes in, fine, you got the first set of data and you have trained your first model, right? The journey doesn't end there; it actually begins there, because the model is a living, breathing organism. And there is also what is referred to as model drift. You have deployed a model and it starts seeing new data, and it's actually you might have deployed it saying hi, it's 85%, but over time you start seeing that the model performance starts dropping. Why? Because it's seeing new kind of data. And what do you do with such kind of situations? So the software industry had something called as DevOps. Software engineers are very familiar with DevOps. In the last 3 years, MLOps or machine learning operations has become very popular. So there's an urgent need, sir, if you ask me, if we can create a troika where there is a public-private data lake, which can be probably created in, say, one of the, the IITs or the PSUs, where Army, Air Force, Navy can bring in their data and they know that it is a location that they control, and MOD has to stay on top of it. That would be, a very great start. And from a very technology perspective, of course, technology is not the only answer to all these problems. But it's a very important, part of the solution. Approaches like confidential computing and federated learning, where you can make it as a part of the framework. Maybe it can be taken up as IDEX or a TDF file. Thank you for your patience here.
Thank you, Andrew. You have raised 2 points, that is having public-private database or data link and model for exchange of data. That is a very important point, and means that may lead to confidentiality and confidential computing and federation, all these things mentioned. I have kept our DRDO representative, Dr. Subrat Rakshit, who has spoken in the first session. I have kept him in the last because he is already working with our services. He is also working with industry. So I think he is the right person to give replies to the points raised by, or mention something about the points raised by our industry partners. Dr. Subrat Rakshit, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So, actually I was writing down stuff, and it will be probably something like that. See, so the one thing was that as DRDO, we interact with industry as an upstream partner who's doing some development contract for us, giving us some components. Once the project becomes mature, then industry also plays a downstream partner. We give them the TOT and they take it to field and do the proliferation. Now the question is, what is going on? I mean, could we then just factor ourselves out of it and short circuit the whole thing? Even in conventional thing, there was a risk management involved by DRDO had to get it, and I'm seeing it even more so for AI. So in the case of AI, there are 2 risks. One is a technical risk, one is a business risk. So the technical risk in AI is that there is a very late discovery of exactly the precise nature of the challenge and the problem you are solving. So you could be a speech processing expert or a text processing expert or a neural net classifier building expert. But all that notwithstanding and any prior work you have done notwithstanding, when you are more than halfway into the project, then finally the real data will get unleashed on you. And either your AI works or it doesn't. Now, I will get to the various components of it later on, but that is the late in the day technical risk that you will face. So now if there is a startup or any of these smaller industries who are putting their hands up for it, and then they are in a bit of a dodgy state as far as the technical risk is concerned, then yes, we can always, as DRDO, step in and kind of boost them over the threshold or give the benefit of some extra man hours and equipment from our side to try and boost things up. So that is one role that we play, and why us serving as an integrator for all these IDEX and TDFs is the way the government is thinking about it. Now, having done it, we are, however, not the persons to really do a scale up. We don't take supply orders, we issue supply orders. So the Army or the Navy can't give us an order directly in any case. So therefore, then we have to do a TOT to some industry, and it could be a DPSO, it could be an industry partner. L&T has worked with CARE, so as well. And they are the ones who go and do the proliferation. Now, when you are taking an AI solution and going in, it's very different from, let's say, you're taking a gun or a tank and going in. Because an AI solution is going to hit the human beings. Now, do they like that AI? Are they insecure about it? Do they feel that they thought that they would be working less, but now training the AI is looking like even more work to them? These would all lead to business failures. Your AI may be working fine technically, but whether you are getting a recipient organization to accept the disruption because of that AI, as opposed to the textbook benefit of AI that had been sold to them. See, these things need a bit of working. It's not that it won't work, it will work, and eventually happiness will prevail. But instead of being a quick 2-month event, it might well have turned out to be a 1-year event. Now, that is still a business risk if you are, not having enough margin. Not everybody is as robust as Bell, which is why we love Bell. We always take them on because they don't complain. But eventually, we want to get the things streamlined enough that even other companies can painlessly deal with that business risk part. So that's a continuum that was being suggested between the small companies to the big companies to absorb some of the risks. Another thing is ultimately the industry wants to get paid. Now, whether it's a startup, whether it's a big company. Paid means you need to have a costing model. Now, here again, to address an elephant in the room, you need to effectively convince North Block and South Block. Now, so far, early on what we did is we took this bill of materials approach, right? So, there'd be some parts from Poland, parts from England, parts from Russia. The bill of material came to something, slap on 10% and you got the cost for it. No big, accountant would have done your costing for it. It got only slightly better when we went to software. Now we started billing people for man-months. It's like so many function pointer analysis, kilo lines of code, so much blood and sweat, 20,000 man-months, therefore so many crores of bill. What are you going to do for AI? Once in a way there might be a DGX server, but that bill of material cannot be padded enough to pay all the scientists and engineers salary. Now you come to the man-month. A brain-dead person working for a long time coming up with a bad solution is hardly the one who should be getting more money. So there's an inherent contradiction. How do you pay for brilliance? So it comes down to IPR. Now the only way IPR gets costed is if you appeal to market dynamics and in the market what was the cost. Now, if market has determined the cost, means it has already sold somewhere else, somebody took the business risk, bought something, did something. If you are talking about first in the type in the world, India doing something, Atmanirbharta, you can't now say, I will buy something that has been selling for 10 years in the NATO market. So, somewhere or the other, I suspect, for AI to make money, we need to cross this bridge. How do we metric an IPR solution as a utility to the end user? It cannot be my Rona that, I spent so much money on materials and I spent so much money on manpower. You will have to make an argument based on the customer benefited what from the solution being sold. And you have to carry that argument through North Block and South Block. It's not going to be easy. Till then, DRDO will give all the contracts and try to keep things going. We don't want anybody getting burnt in the bargain. But you would have to join DRDO and come up with a rational way of dealing with IPR for AI products. Without that, this party is not going to get started. Now, these are the two big things. There's also the question of proliferation and employment. Somebody asked. My view is that AI is going to be the next thing. First you had something going from electromechanical to, let's say, diodes and computer-based. So the ICT part kicked in. No sooner had you had it electronics and hardware defined, then software kicked in, and then the thing went into software. So AI will do to software what software did to hardware. Eventually everything will be AI defined. What happened when we were going through those transitions? The Y2K sucked every second class degree student off the campus. Same thing happened with software. So I don't really think why AI should not be like that. And you look at India's position and strength. We have got huge HR assets. We are 1 billion, and good fraction of them are well educated and maybe not having a good job. So expanding that HR is not going to be a problem. Where we have had problems is where a huge capex was required. Let's say you're setting up a silicon foundry plant somewhere and it costs a huge amount of money. Now we have a bottleneck. But why should paying salary on a monthly basis, which is effectively an OPEX for any industry, become such a problem? Rather, we should look upon it as a solution. I mean, this is the sector that is made for India as much as software was a sector made for India. If we don't make a skilling here and take the battle abroad and corner the international market, what are we doing? So, whatever may be the effect everywhere else, in India at least it should be good. And even in terms of software, see, you have products like the operating systems and database. One company makes it and dominates the market. AI is not going to be like that. There is not a voice AI.exe that he makes it and he's out of business. Nothing like that. If there are two customers there, he goes and services one customer, he'll find he has to put in that bigger team for the next customer, so he's run out of his people, he will get a business and get it. So, this is going to be something where the human resource part of it is going to dominate, not your huge back-end infrastructure, and so therefore industry is best prepared to hire the requisite number of people and go ahead. Only thing is, yes, you have to get, as I said, the costing model right, you have to get the technical and business risk management right, and then we got a real good play going. So, on that happy note, I'll leave it to the moderator to take us to lunch.
Thank you, Dr. Subbu. You have given replies to a certain extent. I believe that industry would be, they have agreed to your thoughts. But if there is any other thought, I would like to request if any or Dr. Patil would like to say something before I close. And Mr. Anbu Paingar also has said something. He wants to say something.
You put me on a spot, but I can tell you, the entire risk is always carried by the industry, whether it's known or unknown. So I think that's sufficient to say, we all understand at some point in time what exactly to face and how and justify.
Mr. Anbu Paingar?
Well, I wanted to pick up something with, completely tangential to data. And here I probably will be representing the voice of startups and MSMEs. We are a 35-man company, been in the game for a while now. The great thing is we got enabled by PSA's office, and then we got enabled from PDF, DRDO, and then a couple of things going through in IDEX. And I would probably guess that is going to, now somebody as a speaker in the morning made a case that we really are in a so-called blue ocean. The number of problems that are there to be solved is so much. The number of people to solve it are actually much less. Now, my sense is, sir, that as this ship rolls on, moves further, there will be more and more startups winning multiple contracts and multiple such kind of mechanisms. And the way TDF and IDEX they are all structured, I believe that there is a very important need for creating a JAM equivalent for startups and SMEs. I think what the JAM did was it made the unbankable bankable and giving them credit worthiness. Today, on top of a TDF and an IDEX, if I go to a bank, nobody will honor me. So unless and until good news is that fund leaders like Newspace and IdeaForge, they want to raise money, which is actually very heartening for us. It tells that the VC ecosystem is slowly fledgling. But this is a real problem. Some kind of a JAM should be equivalent for startups and MSMEs to speak up.
Thank you, Mr. Anbu. Your point well taken. Now, there are actually two models which are available right now. One is the DRDO model, another is IDEX group, which is little liberal. Third model, which he has mentioned just now, JAM model, something like that. Overall, I'm sure that industry and the startups from this platform have clearly indicated that to the services that have confidence on them, they are working for the country. So that message should spread across, and I'm sure that in coming days we will work together, because it is Indian industry which is also working for economy. This is our services who are working for safety of the nation. On the top of it, the policy reform, where we come as Ministry of Defence, all the recommendations in all the 3 sessions have been taken note of, and we will be working on the policies and develop a policy framework very soon, with involvement of our services and industry on the basis of these recommendations. I thank all panelists present here who have contributed a lot and given us an insight on the industry perspective. I would also thank from this platform, because this is the last session, to all the participants here, ambassadors, high commissioners, officials from services, from ministries, academia, students, industry partners, media, and all whom I have left. I am thankful on behalf of Ministry of Defence to all of you for their great participation and making it a grand success. Thank you very much. Thank you.